My name is Lowell. I've always had a quiet kind of life, steady work, predictable days, calm evenings. I never wanted fireworks or drama. I just wanted to build something solid, something I could trust. I thought that's what I had with Marlene. We met in a bookstore, of all places. She was browsing the psychology section, looking for a book her therapist had recommended. I made some awkward comment about Freud and his obsession with mothers, and somehow that turned into coffee, then a long walk, and then 5 years of marriage. We weren't flashy. We were dependable. Or at least I thought we were. Looking back, the signs were there, only I didn't want to see them. She'd started dressing differently. More makeup. More nights out with friends I never met. Conversations felt thinner. We'd be in the same room, but miles apart. I asked if she was okay. She'd say she was just tired. I offered to plan a weekend trip, something to reconnect. She smiled, and then checked her phone mid-sentence. I remember one night clearly. We were sitting on the couch. I reached for her hand, and she pulled it away like I'd burned her. She didn't even notice. That's when it hit me. She wasn't pulling away from the touch. She was pulling away from me. I wanted to believe it was just a phase. That marriage naturally has its winners. But winter became frost. Then ice. Then silence. And finally, that silence cracked open. She didn't tell me about the affair. I found out by accident. It was a Tuesday. I had come home early from work because of a power outage at the office. She wasn't expecting me. Her purse was on the kitchen counter. Her phone was face up. A text came in. Last night was amazing. I keep thinking about you. From someone named Braxton. My heart didn't race. It didn't sink. It just stopped. Like a clock that knew time didn't matter anymore. I didn't open the phone. I didn't storm out. I stood there, staring at that one line, wondering how long she had been gone while still sleeping next to me. When she walked through the door 10 minutes later, I looked at her like I didn't know her. And maybe I didn't. I asked who Braxton was. She froze. Just blinked. Then tried to lie, something about an old college friend. But her voice shook. Her hands trembled. And suddenly, she didn't seem like the confident, distant woman I'd been living with. She seemed scared. Caught. Small. She cried that night. Told me it wasn't serious. That it was just something that happened. That she didn't mean to hurt me. I nodded like I was listening, but inside, everything was collapsing. Not because she cheated, but because she chose someone else when I was still trying. I didn't shout. I didn't pack bags. I told her she needed to decide what she wanted, and I would quietly leave if I wasn't it. She chose him. 3 days later, I was gone. A small apartment, a single suitcase, and a head full of questions I didn't know how to answer. I didn't tell my family. Didn't post anything. I just vanished from her world. And she didn't reach out. Not then. Weeks passed. Then months. Life became routine again, but lonelier. I started walking in the evenings just to keep the walls from pressing in. I began journaling just to stay sane. Some nights, I'd sit on the edge of the bed and stare at nothing for hours, just wondering how someone could stop loving you so quietly. And just when I started to feel like maybe I'd survived it, I got a knock on the door. It was Marlene. And behind her eyes, something had changed. When I opened the door that evening, I wasn't expecting anyone. Certainly not her. I didn't even recognize Marlene at first. She looked like someone who had run from a storm, wet hair, no makeup, clutching a canvas tote to her chest like it was armor. For a moment, I actually thought I was dreaming. That somehow my brain had conjured her up as a sick test. But the sound of her breath, shaky and real, reminded me this wasn't a memory. I didn't know where else to go, she said softly, as not meeting mine. I didn't answer. I didn't nod. I didn't open the door wider. I just stood there like stone, unsure whether to let her in or let the moment die where it stood. She waited for me to say something. Anything. And when I didn't, she dropped her head and whispered, "I'm sorry." It didn't hit me the way I thought it would. That word, sorry. It didn't unlock anything. No relief, no fury, no collapse. It just echoed between us like an apology shouted into a canyon. Too far away to reach me. Eventually, I stepped aside. Let her in. Not because I forgave her. Not because I wanted to. But because after all the silence, I needed to know why. She sat on the edge of my worn-out couch like it belonged to someone else. I stayed near the kitchen counter, arms crossed, not to be cold, but to hold myself together. What followed wasn't some neat explanation or grand confession. It was fragments. Phrases. Half-spoken thoughts she could barely string together. I thought I wanted something different. He wasn't who I thought he was. You were always good to me. Too good. I made the worst mistake of my life. I didn't think you'd disappear. She talked. I listened. But the more she spoke, the more distant I felt from the man I used to be when she left. Her words felt directed at a version of me that no longer existed. The one who waited, who blamed himself, who thought maybe if he'd just been a little more exciting, she wouldn't have strayed. That man died the night she walked away. I ended it months ago, she finally admitted. He turned out to be, I don't know, shallow, selfish. He wasn't anything like what I thought. And the worst part is, I left the one person who actually saw me. She was crying now. The kind of crying that makes you look for exits, not because you don't care, but because you can't be the landing pad anymore. I still hadn't said a word. She looked up at me, eyes red and glassy, and said, Lowell, please. I just want to talk. I don't expect anything. Just let me talk. And I told her this. You've already said more than I expected. But the truth is, I don't know if I want to hear the rest. Because the more I hear, the more I realize I'm not who I was. And I don't think I want to be again. She went silent. The clock in the kitchen ticked louder than her breathing. Finally, I said, you can stay for now. But that doesn't mean you get to stay here. She nodded. But what she didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I wasn't just rebuilding myself these past few months. I had already started something new. Something no one knew about. And it was about to change everything. She didn't bring a suitcase. Not a toothbrush. Not even a jacket. Just that tote bag, overstuffed and wrinkled like her expression, slung over one shoulder like it carried all her regret. I made her tea. Not because I cared if she was cold, but because I needed something to do with my hands. While the water boiled, she walked around my apartment like someone trying not to touch anything, as if the furniture might accuse her. She paused at the bookshelf, ran a finger along the spines. Some were ours, leftovers from the life we dismantled. Some were new. The kind of titles she used to roll her eyes at. Quiet things. Solitary voices. I'd changed. The kettle whistled. I didn't turn it off right away. When we finally sat down, the air between us felt too wide for words. She started to speak, and then didn't. Again and again. Her breath would rise, then collapse into silence. It wasn't awkward. It was careful. Like walking across ice and not knowing where it might crack. Then she said something that caught me off guard. I kept dreaming of your quiet. I blinked. What do you mean? She stared into her tea, as if the surface would answer for her. He filled every room with noise. Jokes. Music. Opinions. But it always felt like he was trying to drown something out. With you, it was the opposite. You could sit still. Let silence be real. She looked at me. Really looked. That scared me, Lowell. Back then, I didn't understand it. I didn't respond. Partly because I didn't know how. But mostly because I'd spent so long earning my silence, and I wasn't about to give it up again. She told me things. About him. About how quickly the illusion faded. How charm turned to control. Laughter to manipulation. How it took her months to realize she hadn't chosen a man, she'd chosen a mask. He made me feel wanted, she said, but never safe. I kept my hands wrapped around my cup, letting the warmth reach my knuckles. I didn't offer comfort, or pity, or judgment. Just space. Because part of me, the part she hadn't broken, was still watching. Still waiting to see if this was real, or just another escape route for her. Then came the question I wasn't ready for. Do you ever think about what we had? I set my cup down. Carefully. I think about what I thought we had. And that was the line that split the room. Because the truth is, I'd done more than rebuild. I'd grown into someone she wouldn't recognize. Someone who didn't need to be forgiven or remembered. Just respected enough to be left alone if that's what he chose. But I didn't say all that. Instead, I stood. I need to walk, I said. She looked startled, maybe even hurt. But I didn't wait for a reply. I grabbed my coat and left. Out into the cold, past the familiar sidewalk cracks, past the mailbox I never used, into the streetlight hush of evening. And as I walked, I told myself, I won't go back to being the man I was just so she can feel less guilty about leaving. What I didn't know, not yet, was that Marlene wasn't going to leave after that night. She had come with a plan, but not the one I was expecting. 3 days. She stayed for 3 days. Not because I asked her to. Not because she begged. But because neither of us said the words to end it. Not again. Not in that quiet, unspoken way we'd perfected. I kept waiting for her to unzip that tote bag. To pull out something ordinary, pajamas, a phone charger, a toothbrush that smelled like peppermint. But the bag just sat there, unopened. Like her arrival was only ever meant to be temporary. The first night, she slept on the couch. Or said she did. I didn't ask. The second night, she moved to the floor, curled up in a blanket with her back to the TV, which played muted cooking shows into the dark. The third night, she didn't sleep. I saw her silhouette at the window at 2:17 a.m., watching snowfall gather in soft piles on the cars below. And me? I pretended I wasn't keeping track. She cooked once. Eggs, toast, and something that might have been an apology disguised as a side of fruit. She didn't eat. Just watched me across the table like someone staring at a locked door they used to have the key for. I didn't ask why she came. Not anymore. Because the longer she stayed, the clearer it became, even to her, that this wasn't about love. It was about the absence of it. About her reaching into the past and expecting it to hold her again. But the past doesn't hold anything. It just echoes. And eventually, it began to echo louder than either of us could stand. On the morning of the fourth day, I woke up to the scent of her shampoo in the hallway. It shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. Because I hadn't smelled that particular scent since the week before she left. It struck me, irrationally, that she brought it on purpose. A bottle from the past, uncapped in my present. Like leaving a fingerprint. I walked into the kitchen. She was sitting there, coffee untouched, fingers trembling slightly around the mug. "I need to say something," she said. "I didn't come here for you to take me back." I waited. She glanced at the bag by the door. "I came to give you something." I remember thinking it was going to be a letter. Or some symbolic item. A photo. Closure in a box. But she reached inside that bag, finally, and pulled out something that made my stomach tighten. A notebook. Mine. The one I'd lost during the move. The one I thought I'd accidentally left behind in the house before she took it over. Full of my sketches. My half-thoughts. Letters I never gave her. "I kept it," she said. "I don't know why. Maybe I needed to feel like I still had a piece of you. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to let you go." She slid it across the table. I didn't touch it. "You could have mailed it," I said flatly. She nodded. "I almost did. But then I read the last page." My skin prickled. I didn't remember the last page. I didn't want to. She opened it, turned it toward me, and read aloud. "If she ever comes back, I'll listen. But I won't rebuild the same house. I'll leave the ruins exactly as they are and build something new beside them." She closed the book. Her voice cracked, but her face stayed composed. "You were right, even then," she whispered. I reached for the notebook, finally, and pulled it toward me. It felt heavier than I remembered. So did everything. I stood. "You've said what you needed," I told her gently. She stood too. But she didn't cry. She just picked up the bag, walked toward the door, and paused. "Lowell," she said without turning around. "You were never boring. You were just real." And I didn't know what to do with real. Then she was gone. For the second time. And this time, she didn't leave anything behind. Not even the scent of her shampoo. The apartment felt different after she left. Not heavier, not lighter, just rearranged. Like someone had quietly entered while I slept and shifted everything 3 inches to the left. I knew where everything was, but nothing sat quite right. The notebook stayed on the kitchen table for 3 days. I didn't open it again. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid that if I read what I had written back then, back when I was unraveling, I'd start to feel like him again. And I couldn't afford that. I kept moving. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just steady. Like walking through fog with no real destination, just the promise that eventually it would clear. Work became my lifeline. The people there didn't ask questions. My coworker Jalen invited me to join his trivia team on Thursday nights, and for some reason, I said yes. Not because I love trivia, but because I needed to sit in a place where no one looked at me with pity or regret. One night after trivia, while walking to my car, I saw a woman standing alone beneath a flickering street lamp. She wasn't waiting for anyone, just looking up at the sky like she'd forgotten why she came outside. There was something in her stillness that mirrored mine. I don't know why I noticed. I don't know why I kept thinking about her after I drove away. But that was the moment I realized I hadn't truly seen anyone in months. Not really. Not since before the silence between me and Marlene began growing teeth. That same night, I came home, turned on one soft lamp in the corner, and opened the notebook. I read the first 10 pages without breathing. The words didn't even feel like mine. They were written by someone who still believed a kind explanation could fix betrayal, someone who thought love was a structure that could be repaired with enough intention. It wasn't until page 22 that I found the entry from the day I left. It wasn't angry. It wasn't poetic. It was just a sentence. "I don't know what hurts more, losing her, or realizing she already lost me long before I noticed. I stared at that line for so long, the words blurred. I hadn't remembered writing it, but it rang true in a way most memories don't. Honest. Raw. Not polished for anyone else's understanding. That night, I slept without dreaming. And the next morning, I deleted her number. Not as a statement. Not to prove anything. Just to be honest about where I was. Because I knew something she didn't. Closure isn't a moment. It's a choice you keep making, long after the door closes. But life doesn't pause when you find peace. Sometimes, it opens a different door quietly, gently, and dares you to step through without checking who might be waiting on the other side. 2 weeks later, I saw her again. Not Marlene. Someone else. That woman from beneath the street lamp. And this time, she wasn't standing still. She walked straight toward me. I was in line at the hardware store, holding a box of cabinet screws I didn't really need, when I saw her again. The woman from under the street lamp. Her hair was pulled back in a loose knot. A pair of sunglasses perched on her head like she hadn't noticed the rain outside. She was standing in the aisle by the electrical cords, flipping through a coupon booklet like it mattered. It didn't. I almost didn't say anything. I'm not the type. I usually keep to myself, let moments pass, let people walk away. But there was something about her stillness again, that same calm, that same deliberate slowness. I spoke before I thought. Did you ever figure out what you were looking at that night? She turned, puzzled at first, then smiled the kind of smile that doesn't push itself too hard. You saw that? I nodded. You looked like someone trying to remember a name they hadn't spoken in years. She blinked once, then said something that startled me a little. I was wondering if the sky looks different to people who've lost something they didn't want back. We stood there, awkward and oddly quiet, the overhead lights buzzing faintly. Her name was Fern. That's what she told me a few minutes later in the parking lot. She said it used to embarrass her when she was younger, like I was born into a botanical garden, but now she liked that no one forgot it. I told her my name. She said it suited me. Then she looked at me like she already knew I had a story, but she wasn't the kind of person who'd ask for it on the first day. We didn't exchange numbers. She didn't suggest coffee. It wasn't a meet cute. It wasn't cinematic. It was peculiar. Gentle. Like standing beside a stranger at a bus stop and realizing they're humming a tune you haven't heard since childhood. That night, I went home and made dinner the way I always do. Quiet music. Too much pasta. The apartment still smelled faintly like Marlene's shampoo, just barely, in the towels or the fabric of the chair. I considered washing everything again, bleaching it out of the corners. But I didn't. Instead, I took the notebook from the shelf. Not to read it. Just to hold it. It felt lighter now. As I stood there with it in my hands, I realized something I hadn't been ready to say out loud. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for her to apologize again. Not for someone to fix the pieces she left behind. And definitely not for some cinematic moment of renewal. I was simply present. And that felt strange. Unfamiliar. Like standing in someone else's life, wearing clothes that almost fit. The next afternoon, I saw Fern again. It was raining this time, really raining, and she was standing beneath a small awning outside a laundromat, holding a paperback book in one hand and a paper bag in the other. She didn't wave. Just lifted her eyebrows in surprise, like the universe had played the same trick twice. I joined her under the awning without asking. She offered me a piece of orange gum. Then she asked, "Do you believe in coincidences?" I didn't answer. I just took the gum. Not everything needs explaining. Some things just need time. We didn't text. We didn't call. We just started bumping into each other, over and over, like two people circling a neighborhood neither of us meant to live in. I saw Fern again outside a used furniture shop. She was examining a chipped mirror with gold trim, running her fingers along the crack in the glass like she was reading a scar. When she noticed me, she didn't smile right away. Just gave me a soft nod, like, "Yep, still here." I walked over. Asked if she was looking for anything in particular. "Reflection," she said. "The kind that doesn't flatter you too much." I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't. We walked the aisles for a while. The store smelled like dust and forgotten stories. I kept waiting for her to ask me something personal, where I was from, what I did, whether I had someone in my life, but she didn't. That was the thing about her. She never reached for information like most people do. She waited to see what would rise naturally. Eventually, I told her I had been married. She didn't flinch. Didn't lean in like she was hungry for details. She just said, "That makes sense." And somehow, I knew she didn't mean it in a cruel way. After that, we sat on a faded green couch neither of us could afford, not saying much. Just watching the door swing open and closed as strangers drifted in and out of the shop. She asked me, "Do you think people ever really get past being chosen second?" The question wasn't about me. Or maybe it was. Maybe it was about both of us. But I didn't give her a polished answer. I told her I wasn't sure. That I hadn't figured out if I was angry because I'd been left, or because I'd stayed longer than I should have. Fern nodded like she understood something I hadn't even said out loud. Later that night, I walked home through a sudden gust of wind that carried broken leaves down the sidewalk like soft confessions. The streetlights buzzed. A stop sign rattled on its post. I felt something I hadn't felt in months, permission. Not joy. Not closure. Not attraction or direction or clarity. Just permission to exist where I was, without explanation. Marlene texted that night. It was the first message since she left the notebook. "Hope you're okay. You don't have to respond. Just thinking about you." I read it once. Then again. Not because I missed her, but because I was checking myself. Seeing if there was still a bruise to press. There wasn't. I didn't reply. And not because I wanted to punish her. It's just, not every silence means you're waiting. Some silences mean you're done. I stared at my phone for a while, then set it face down on the windowsill. Outside, the city carried on without me. And that, somehow, felt just right. Weeks passed. Fern and I never declared anything. No defining conversation. No awkward lines to cross or draw. We just kept showing up in each other's lives, like the spaces we used to wander alone had gently overlapped without asking for permission. One Sunday morning, I ran into her at the farmer's market near the edge of town. She had a bag of oranges and a tiny cactus in her hand, and she greeted me with a soft, amused expression like I'd interrupted a conversation she'd been having with herself. We walked together, tried samples of odd cheeses, talked about nothing important. She said she liked watching people pick fruit, how they pressed their thumbs into peaches, how careful they were with what would rot anyway. That night, we sat on my balcony with tea and two mismatched blankets. Fern had this way of curling up on furniture like it had always been hers. But she didn't take up space. She just belonged there. The breeze was soft. The moon was late. The city lights below us blinked like someone had forgotten to turn them off. Out of nowhere, she asked me what I missed most about my marriage. I didn't lie. "I miss thinking it was forever," I said. She nodded once, and then said something I'll never forget. "Maybe it still can be. Just not with the same person." We didn't say anything else that night. Not about love. Not about past lives or futures. We just existed beside one another, exactly as we were. That was enough. It's been 6 months since Marlene showed up with the notebook. I haven't seen her since. She messaged once more, something brief, something respectful. I never replied. There was nothing cruel about it. I just knew my story with her had ended. Quietly, but completely. Fern and I still don't label what we are. We meet for late walks and early coffees. Sometimes she reads aloud from strange old books she finds in second-hand bins. Sometimes I draw little sketches of her while she's not looking. It's not a love story in the way most people would describe one. But it's real. And it's calm. And it doesn't feel like I'm trying to hold my breath anymore. I've stopped waiting for the past to let me go. It already did. And I've stopped trying to rebuild what was. Instead, I'm learning how to live inside what is. It's not perfect. It's just peaceful. And after everything, that's more than enough.